Finishers and factions catching action.
And welcome to Finishers and Factions does NXT Vengeance Day 2025. We are in the United States capital city of Washington, D.C., out of the Care First Arena. My name is Adam, and I'm joined, as ever, by my co-host, Rich. Hi, Rich. How's it going?
I'm all good, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good, mate. All good. Ready to talk about what, considering that NXT is classed as the developmental brand within WWE. I'm ready to talk about this absolute fucking stonker of a PLE. To be quite honest,
And what a PLE we had as well. God damn. But like you said, it's
Yeah.
supposed to be the weakest of the three branding. Did not show it with this PLE at all.
no. I think after this PLE, I think we can, especially with the debut of bits and pieces like Evolve, where that is a true developmental, what I would class as a true developmental brand. We're looking at NXT just being the third brand. It's Raw, SmackDown, and NXT is the starting block essentially. I don't think we can call it a developmental brand any longer.
They're cutting the chain a little bit younger this time and giving some other people a push into, I suppose, to refill the NXT roster.
Yeah, definitely. But Vengeance Day. I mean, Vengeance in general is quite a historic pay-per-view within WWE. It was sort of rebranded a few years ago to Vengeance Day, and has held quite a few debuts. I mean, one of the most striking of those debuts. I mean, we saw the debut of one LA Knight not too long ago. Before he's pushed to the main roster, he made his WWE debut at Vengeance Day, so it's not. It doesn't ever pass without comment.
No, there was definitely some big moments in this one. No debuts this time round, though, that I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, not strictly true there, Rich, because we did have well, it's a debut that's been teased for a little while, and we saw a quartet of mystery assailants pop up a couple of times during the PLE, but we'll sort of come to that as and when. But yeah, I mean they
Started off pretty strong little match to get into with Stephanie Baker and Fallon Henley kicking off the show with the Women's North American Championship title match. And what a way to
definitely
start the show as well. It was all action from the word go with this one.
Yeah, very much so. First off, it's important to mention that we did have both Jada Parker and Carmen Petrovic. See, I don't remember seeing Kalani. They may have referenced the fact that she was there, but I don't ever actually remember seeing her displayed on camera. I don't think she was actually there.
Then I've got them confused.
Carmen Petrovic and Jada Parker were definitely there. That is not up for debate. And I think one of the things that we should mention while we're mentioning about the crowd, I mean, the cure is definitely over with the NXT audience in Washington DC. It was actually almost embarrassing for the current reigning champion. I mean, I know she's currently taking on a heel persona at the moment, but to not have an awful lot of support going out there, I mean, that either means she's doing a really good job as a heel or she's just not over as a superstar.
Yeah, and it's really hard when you're not over to try and get that sort of backing behind you. We've seen it with lots of superstars in the past that have had good gimmicks that just couldn't get them over.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, despite the fact that she's not that over with the crowd, sort of Henley was dictating the pace early on in this match, which you sort of come to expect from the champion, really.
It's the champion's advantage, though. She can run that match how she wants to, and if she wants to take it off with a, bull in a china shop at the start to try and wear her opponent out, that's the way she's going to roll that time. And it does work against a lot of the superstars in the division, but Stephanie Vaquer, I don't think is one that was going to work against her too much.
No, definitely not. And sort of Stephanie Vaquer taking sort of a lot of submission holds during this match. I noticed she was sort of very much favouring trying to get sort of Fallon Henley to tap. Basically, I think she was definitely looking to try and embarrass the current North American champion in this match.
Say, there's one thing making a champion for a 3 count, but managing to take a championship through submission just kind of rubs salt into the wound. And
oh, definitely.
I mean, she looked like she enjoyed trying to rip every joint Fallon Henley had out of socket for quite a lot of that match. A lot of sort of joint manipulation, which seemed to work quite nicely in Steph's favour against Fallon. As the match got sort of later on, to start off with, it wasn't quite so easy for her. But I suppose once you've had all your joints pulled and torn out for a little bit, you're going to be aching anyway, aren't you?
Yeah. Plus, I think sort of Fallon Henley may have taken this match possibly a little bit too lightly, only on the basis that she wasn't out there alone. She was out there with the rest of Fatal Attraction, and they didn't stop themselves from making themselves known either. Although they did have to be incredibly, I'm going to use the word clever for lack of a better word about it, only because the last thing that they would have wanted on such a grand stage was their champion, their friend, losing. They wouldn't have lost the championship, but they would have lost the match via DQ.
Disqualification would have come in at some point, but yeah, you'd rather not have that loss on your record if you're still keeping your title. And you can imagine
definitely
they were told at one point as well, you only join in when I need you to, and you make it sneaky.
Yeah, don't get involved unless you have to. Don't.
Attraction, to be fair.
Yeah. But yeah, Henley very much was in control for the first part of this match. I think in this case, just based on how it all went and how the match sort of progresses, I think this was sort of by design by Vaquer. I don't think she was. I don't think she necessarily struggled with Fallon Henley to begin with. I think it was more of a case of, if I just relax my body and let her crack on, maybe she'll run out of steam early on, sort of thing, which isn't a bad way to deal with it. It's not a conventional way, certainly, but
I mean, and
you normally see that
did
from
hit some really nice moves in the process of tiring herself out as well. I made a note of a net breaker she hit off the second rope for a 2 count. I think they referred to it as a rope block buster, but it was it was definitely a neck breaker.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's one thing that I think me and you have spoken about off podcast before is obviously a lot of the commentary team are former wrestlers themselves. They will take great pride in knowing their shit about the industry that they love, which includes knowing the technical terms for
all the
moves. And I think Corey Graves is especially guilty for this on more than one occasion. Is that I feel he goes a bit far with it sometimes. I feel like he could stand to slow his roll with it a little bit. I don't think it quite. Yeah, pretty much. I just don't think it requires knowing the full sort of Mexican Japanese anthology of.
Tell me what the move is if it's cool enough to think about mentioning. Like, oh,
Maybe that's what he does. Maybe he's already doing that, and we're just getting sick and tired of.
Corey Graves.
Well, yeah, maybe. But
Could be the Miz.
he is very much a Miz-like character. But we're not going to talk about the Miz tonight. Miz was not involved in Vengeance Day, surprisingly. But yeah, I mean, this match, I've got to admit, I think I got a note of the blockbuster move that they mentioned. Sort of off the second. I got made a note of it off the second rope rather than the apron, but that's.
Yeah, second rope for the net break off the second rope.
It was a Henley with a blockbuster off the second rope, but I didn't make note of whether it ended in a 2 count or no.
I did.
Fair enough.
I also I did see at one point. This goes a move the other way that Stephanie Baker managed to hang a triangle hold over the top rope. So a triangle armbar, I believe it was, over the top rope, just to show off her athleticism. But that was a mouthful. And it's not something you expected to see from someone so tall when it comes to these sort of matches.
No, definitely
one
not.
move that I was quite impressed by.
I mean, there's a few moves that they. I was going to say there's a few moves that Vicker pulled out. I mean, she hit a 619 at one point.
Yeah, I made note of that one. There was I can't remember what they referred to it as, but she had it's like a corkscrew knee thing off the turnbuckle. She did that was really nice.
Yeah, so I'm still getting used to Vicker's sort of moveset arsenal, if you like. But I very much got the impression that this was sort of a standard fare sort of deal from
Well,
Vicker.
here we go. I just scrolled down. Stephanie Vicker used a dragon screw into a Meteora for a 2 count, and then had a pump handle exploder on Fallon Henley as well. So that's a huge combination of moves that she's managed to pump in there as well. And all in a very short period of time.
I think once Vicker had sort of settled into the match, I think we very much saw an in control Vicker for the majority of this match, especially as she takes advantage of or manages to show a masterful way of being able to deal with 3 opponents at once on several different occasions, which is only ever going to be impressive, really.
Yeah, she was definitely I think coming into this, she had the swagger in her entry, which made you think she could be given this opportunity. It was nice to see her get up and well, the end of the match, to be fair, kind of with the way she built it up, you knew it was coming, and once she got into that role, you knew that only Stephanie was going to walk out as the new North American champion for this one. Her finisher certainly is absolutely ruthless. That spiral tap, that spinning corkscrew splash, is just beautiful.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, yeah, I don't think there's anybody, whether you're a fan of Stephanie or not, I don't think you can deny she did 100% earn that victory. It wasn't something that was given away. Fallon definitely put up a fight to try and keep hold of that championship, but unfortunately, Fallon's time was done with that championship, at least for the time being. Who knows? We might see her earn it back in the future, but yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, Stephanie. What the moveset that sort of got this Stephanie to this point was sort of a package backbreaker into that spiral tap.
Yeah.
And yeah, just beautiful, beautiful. And a nice bit of history here actually is that Stephanie Baker becomes the first champion of South American origin in WWE history,
She does.
which I
Make
didn't
note of that
realise
one.
until they'd mentioned. We like to try and keep track of all the history making moments because they get brought up again and again and again and again at different WWE events as time goes on. So she has 100% made her very much made her mark on WWE, whether she sort of intended to or not. She's there in the
She'll be a record forever now.
annals of history. So,
I mean, that's
but
definitely somewhere you'd like to be in, especially if you are a wrestler or a fan of pro wrestling. Being in WWE's history books themselves, it's got to be cool.
oh, 100%, 100%. But yeah, we so first title match of the night ended with with a title change, and as we said, what a day, what a way to start off sort of Vengeance Day, and very much sort of I'm classing this as our first PLE that we've covered, just because I'm not sure we can sort of class New Year's Evil, which we also covered, as the first PLE,
We
only
didn't really have a
because
fucking clue what was going on, did we?
no, we
For
really
us, it was
didn't.
just
It
we're
was
going to watch this, chat a bit of shit, and see what happens. And now we're 6 weeks down the line, and we've watched a lot more NXT. We've chatted a lot more shit, and we've definitely seen a lot more things happen.
yeah, definitely, and we're older and wiser for it. So yeah, it's but sort of moving on from there, we actually saw. It took me until a few days after watching this PLE to realise that the VT that we see next, featuring Yoshiki Inamura and Josh Briggs, was the same one that they've just basically replayed the same sort of VT that they've shown on NXT weekly shows before now, and it's just basically recapping how Yoshiki and Inamura managed to sort of come together as a team and everything along those lines. And we know that they are involved in a tag team match next, actually, which is why this sort of promo was put together. I say put together because, as I said, it was
Stolen from a
very much
previous episode.
born of a previous episode. We also saw. I wrote this down as a VT promo, but I think this was just a in case you guys were interested, sort of thing of Sol Ruka and Zarya doing a bit of team building at the beach. Where they posted some videos to social media, and I think this was definitely more Sol Ruka posting to social media than Zarya, as Zarya just does not strike me as the social media type somehow.
Don't see Zarya looking like she's got to be like, oh my god, we've got to put it on Instagram.
Definitely not. I don't think
Not Zarya
we're going to be.
time.
I don't think we're going to be seeing any half-naked pictures of Zarya anytime soon.
Not on the only slams.
But yeah, sort of. This gave me. I don't know about you, but this sort of gave me a bit more of an insight into Zarya as like a character. Sort of very. She's sort of a very angry woman. Like there's a lot of rage built up inside inside quite an intimidating frame of a woman, really. And they, between her and Sol Ruka, they couldn't be more opposite. As Sol Ruka does a lot, she does a lot of surfing. She seems very sort of happy-go-lucky, and then you've got Zarya, who pretty much hates the world.
I mean, we've seen weirder combinations of tag teams over the years. Look at Daniel Bryan and Kane. You know?
Do you know that was the first one that popped into my head as well, because they do sort of remind me of a Kane and Daniel Bryan sort of dynamic. It's but
Truth
not
and
quite
Rebel.
as
Just
not quite as volatile.
yeah. But
Not at
it,
the moment, anyway.
yeah. Well,
But
you never know. But yeah, no, it's the first sort of thing that came to my mind was Daniel Bryan and Kane. When I look at those two, it's just the female equivalent of.
But yeah, we then go into match number 2, which was the men's NXT Tag Championship match between Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Inamura, and the current champions Nathan Frazier and Axiom, otherwise known as Fraxium. Now, this was actually my first experience of watching Fraxium wrestle, because I don't think they've actually wrestled, and they seem to have done quite a lot of work since NXT came to Netflix.
They've been at TNA quite a bit, haven't they? So we've not really seen them.
They've spent a lot of time on I think TNA's Thursday nights.
It's not a show that I'm watching. I watch
No,
a lot of wrestling. I don't think I can squeeze TNA into.
Yeah, on weeks like this where we've got Raw, NXT, and SmackDown, and then we've got a PLE on top. That's at least 4 days worth of wrestling we've got to watch. If we've then going to watch other, I'm a wrestling fan as much as I possibly can be, but I've also got a full-time job and a child, and Rich has 3 kids as well. It's a case that we are very much working this in between everything else. So, yeah, but being able to keep up with more than one promotion's worth of wrestling is a step too far. Certainly is for me, anyway.
Yeah, because I'd start trying to fit TNA in, and then once I've worked that one in, but oh yeah, we can get EW into it, and then it'd be like, right, cool. All we're doing all week is watching wrestling, talking about wrestling, and working. We might as well just be wrestlers at that point.
I mean, if I were a younger man, I'd definitely give it a go. Not gonna lie. Regardless, we digressed. Back to the match. I mean, we saw Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Inamura got this opportunity by an inadvertent sort of triple threat tag team match from Tuesday night, where they earned the opportunity to go against Fraxium for the men's NXT Tag Championship, which isn't a bad. It wasn't. It was one of the more chaotic matches on the card, to the point that I don't think I got a lot of notes for it. But
Didn't get a huge amount of notes for it. I did get that Fraxium came out pretty hot straight away with a double team, and then pardon me. Josh Briggs used a choke slam into a backbreaker of Yoshiki Inamura. So there was some interest. This is a set of tag teams that their moveset I'm not familiar with, so I'm still trying to work out what their go-to is. But I do see a lot with Briggs and Inamura, of Briggs using his strength and his size to kind of use Inamura as like a bowling ball style weapon. It's quite nice. I quite like it.
so the impression I got from Tuesday night with Briggs and Inamura was that they are both very sort of ground and pound hard. That they wrestle hard style. It's a case that they will kick the living daylights out of you. Whereas
you're not going to see
during
them
this
backflipping.
no, definitely not. Whereas during this match, I very much got the impression that Fraxium are the exact opposite. I mean, Nathan Frazier on his own, I felt like I had to double check at one point that I wasn't watching it in fast forward. The guy was racing around like a lunatic.
Yeah, he was definitely. You would struggle to try and work out which one was the speedy luchador between the two of them if you didn't have the guy in the mask.
Yeah, that's what I couldn't quite get my head around, was that you've got Axiom, who's wearing a mask, obviously is a luchador of some kind, but isn't anywhere near as fast and energetic as Nathan Frazier is. But there's a trade-off for that, is that Nathan Frazier's appearances within this match, I noticed, only lasted about maybe 3-4 minutes tops.
Well, he had the old Cody Rhodes style face mask on, so has he got a facial injury that he's nursing at the moment, so they're trying to give him less time in the ring without making him drop the title, if you get me?
I wasn't sure if that was just part of his ring gear, I will be honest.
I remember Cody having one on for years when he had a nose issue, didn't he?
He had one on for a few months where it was during his reign. It was during his tenure as the dashing Cody Rhodes. He then got his face caved. He again got his face caved in and ended up wearing this mask, which turned him into a bit of a bitter heel. This was before he left WWE, went to AEW, and made a name for himself, basically, to come back and preside over all of us as a WWE champ. But it looked very similar to that, but yeah, I felt this was more of a, I don't know if this is Nathan Frazier's normal style of wrestling, whether he's always this energetic, but if he is, then it's easy to see why he might be a tag team wrestler rather than a singles competitor, because if he has to try and wrestle a singles match with that level of energy, he's going to burn himself out really quickly. I don't care how good your cardio is, you're going to burn yourself out.
Well,
you'll be knackered within 5 minutes.
People within the industry like to use Red Bull to help them in those tiring situations. So yeah, Nathan Fraser could have just had one too many Red Bulls.
Quite possibly. I mean, there is a story I heard not too long ago about sort of way back in the day. Is that there used to be a drinks cooler in the back that all the boys used, and it was a case that this was filled with water or sort of some kind of fruit juice. Now Booker T, part of the announced team on NXT, was not a huge water and fruit juice kind of drinker. Instead, he used to, over the course of a taping, used to have 2 Red Bull, and he used to keep them in this cooler. And I can't for the life of me remember who it is who ends up taking his Red Bull on one particular occasion, but the guy nearly ends up tied up in a dumpster because of it. And yeah, Booker T, just you don't take Booker T's Red Bull under any circumstances.
No, Booker T was going nuts at some of the moves that were being hit in this particular match. I know at one point Axiom hit a rather perfectly hit Spanish fly from the top rope onto Yoshiki Inamura, and yeah, I do like seeing these luchador moves at the moment. I've seen the Spanish fly a few times the last few weeks over different tapings. I'm really liking this move right now.
Yeah, and I mean, this match, I actually put down at one point that throughout this match, I think the big standout for me wasn't Fraxium as the champions, it wasn't Josh Briggs, who I haven't seen a lot of. It was actually Yoshiki Inamura. The guy is a beast. He just kept going.
Yeah, he's the gift that keeps on giving as well. And you think, being the bigger bloke, that he'd get gassed faster, but no, he was just, his stamina's unreal. What he managed to pull off against both Nathan Fraser and Axiom, basically on his own for quite a lot of the match, was very, very interesting. Very good quality as well.
But we see this more and more in WWE since Vince McMahon sort of made his dishonourable discharged exit from the company, is that we see a lot more bigger guys.
About Vince McMahon's discharge.
You're the only one that took it there, but regardless, yeah, sort of with his exit, it's a case that we've seen a lot more of these larger superstars who have come in, and despite them being on the fluffier side, we are seeing them being able to pull off some of these moves that realistically, when you look at them, you're like, yeah, no, fatty, you ain't good. You ain't making that. You have
where
not got the facilities for that, big man.
where they are pulling them off like they've been doing them for the last 15, 20 years, and you stood there going, how the fuck did he just do that?
Yeah, and it just delivers to the wow factor. I mean, the War Raiders on Monday nights, some of the moves they pull, some of the moves specifically Ivar pulls off is phenomenal. Really is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a case that at the end of this match, I mean, we see Fraxium retain the championship. But one of the bigger news stories that we got out of this match wasn't Fraxium retaining, although admittedly, there's a part of me that wouldn't have minded seeing Briggs and Inamura lift the championship off for Fraxium. I think it was the only way it was realistically going to end with that one. It wasn't going to go anywhere else or anything like that. We
got
saw
the introduction of an unnamed faction of guys that decided they were going to come in and wreak havoc on the guys left lying in the ring.
So this wasn't entirely unforeseen. We have had a lot of teasers, normally at the end of episodes of NXT over the last few weeks, sort of dropping in the colour card and saying, oh, it's all coming to a head at Vengeance Day. And the only name drop that we managed to get off of this was somebody called Dion Lennox, which I did a little bit of research in, and Google told me he was an American football star, so I'm not 100% certain if my Google research was accurate. But yeah, these guys are relatively unknown. We're not sure where they've come from or anything like that. We know very little about them.
Yeah, so
but
I did
they
a
came
little bit
in.
of research quickly and got the names of them. So I've got them down as Cutler James, Dion Lennox, Osiris Griffin, and Saquon Sugars. But apart from that, there isn't a lot out there about them or what they're about. So we'll have to wait and see what else we see of them and what. I'm guessing we'll probably find out more in a VT rather than a promo, a little bit more about the background of these guys and where they've come from.
I mean, these guys could quite easily be from TNA. We don't know.
It could be.
It's all possible. But yeah, I mean, moving on from that match, we went to a VT promo, which we saw Stack sort of recapping the attack from last week, from Tuesday night, which saw sort of Tony D'Angelo retaining his championship in a cage match, but then having the absolute living daylights beaten out of him by Sean Spears and Sean Spears' acolytes, joined by sort of Izzy Dame. We have it confirmed in the VT that D'Angelo could be out with back issues, and that on Tuesday in NXT we'll see Stacks versus Spears, family versus family.
Well, that'd be an interesting match at the end of it. Like, I haven't seen a lot of Sean Spears wrestle recently, and I don't think we've seen a lot of Stacks wrestling recently either. So just to be able to see those two open up and give it a good sort of kick in will be an interesting one.
So I think Stacks has had one match, one-on-one match since the Netflix era began, and I don't think he won. It's a case. I can't remember who he wrestled. It may have been a few weeks ago, but yeah, it didn't go well for him. Let's put it that way. But from what I can remember, he's a really capable guy. I mean, we found out a few weeks ago as well. We know him now as Sean Spears. He was originally known as Ty Dillinger, to those that can remember that far back. And yeah, I mean, I remember vaguely, for some strange reason, I seem to remember Ty Dillinger with dreadlocks, but I could potentially be thinking of somebody completely different.
Yeah, I'm not 100%
I'm
sure.
Yeah, no. Either way, he wasn't somebody that was widely televised. It was he was very much kept to the bottom of the mid card. If he had a match, he was sort of in the thick of it with probably about 10 or 20 other blokes. So he got lost in the fray. But yeah, Tuesday, Stacks versus Spears should be a really good match, if the hype's to be believed. We then go from that VT into another VT, which sees sort of Eddie Thorpe and Trick Williams sort of talking through the history of their rivalry, sort of going back as far as I mean, it predates certainly our podcast, from what I'm able to understand.
Yeah.
But a lot of what's happened has been sort of covered in our podcast previously, which sort of culminates in tonight's sort of one-on-one strap match between Eddie Thorpe and Trick Williams, and which just so happens to be the next match we're talking about anyway. I mean, this was like the fourth strap match in NXT history, and I believe Eddie Thorpe actually won the last strap match he was involved in, and he's, according to what commentary mentioned during this match, Eddie Thorpe's trying to make himself sort of a specialist in strap matches, which is an odd thing to be a specialist in.
He's had a fair few of them, and he's done quite well in them. It's not a match type I'd want to be doing all the time. Like, it looked like it hurt more than your standard wrestling match. I'm not gonna lie. Like, we've seen.
Oh yeah, you've got to be a special kind of special to want to be sort of in this match and getting whipped to that extent, because it is a whipping 100%.
I didn't think too much about it going into this match, about some of the stuff that you'd be able to get away with. Obviously, like using it as a whip, and then I realised once I noticed that they could tie him up with it, they could hang him up with it, and I was like, oh, you horrible bugger, that is such a match type, a hard one to fight against.
I mean, the official rules of a strap match is that all competitors are tied together with a strap. I mean, this is attached to them in one form or another, normally around the wrist, and it's basically they are strapped together until someone is either pinned or submits.
Well, this match didn't start that way, because they went for Trick Williams went straight at it before they could get the rope on either of them, didn't they? So they got
because my notes actually say that the Eddie Thorpe tries to go after Williams before the strap's even secured. It's kind of a case that a few minutes passes as Williams is sort of getting his own back, and Trick actually ends up getting ends up securing the strap himself.
Yeah, I mean, they both
but
to rip into each other. I don't think they needed the strap. They both wanted to make sure the other one was hurting, bleeding, and dying by the end of this match.
yeah, definitely, it's not something that we. I mean, I think I've probably seen maybe two other strap matches besides this one beforehand in different places, not just in WWE. I think I've seen one in TNA and one in AEW as well, and they are brutal matches, and it really does sort of bring out the sick creative side of the superstars we know and love, realistically. But yeah, Thorpe seems to put some real thought into tying Trick Williams up. He does it on several occasions during the match, whereas Trick seems to focus more on yanking Thorpe around, a bit like a Pinocchio on a string, really.
Basically, like he
As a
was
part
a puppy that was trying to shit on the floor in a kitchen. He was just trying to drag it to the front door the entire time. Like, Trick Williams really didn't come into this match looking like he wanted to be there, and he definitely wasn't wrestling like he wanted to beat Eddie Thorpe. Like, he just didn't seem interested. For a majority of
See,
the match.
I put on this that Eddie Thorpe wasn't really fully focused within the match, despite how it all sort of panned out for him. I don't think that Eddie Thorpe was giving this match 100% of his attention. He seemed a lot more interested, especially at certain points, of how the crowd was reacting to him rather than like the former heavyweight champion of Trick Williams in front of him. He seems a lot more bothered that the crowd was behind Trick Williams than they were behind him.
Yeah, which you'd have thought for someone who's been in the industry for so long, he'd have been used to not necessarily having the crowd behind him, especially with the type of character he plays. It's normally quite a heely sort of character anyway. So it's intriguing whether he's got some personal stuff going on that's kind of keeping his head out the game a little bit. You never know.
This is it. It's one of those. But I mean, I mentioned earlier on, Thorpe spent a lot of time trying to tie Williams up. I was actually quite impressed. At one point, Trick manages to use the strap in sort of a modified STFU. Sort of an STFU submission maneuver on Eddie Thorpe, and honestly, I thought that was going to be the end of it. I thought, oh, this is it. It's game over. But no.
As well.
I mean, Thorpe definitely showed this during the course of this match why he wants to be known as a strap match specialist. I mean, Williams ends up in a position where he's very much vulnerable to a strap-based low blow, which Thorpe takes full advantage of.
Would we have thought any different? No, we both would have done that exact same move.
Oh, 100%. No DQ match. I'm low blowing to fuck. It's a case that
balls are not going to be recovering after this one.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, if ever I find myself in a no DQ match, I'm using the other guy's nutsack as a speed bag.
I mean, I don't
because I ain't winning through any other fucking means.
Yeah, a couple of shots to the plums and a bulldog through the table, mate. That is the end of it.
Yeah, pretty much. I can probably pull off a sort of a semi decent spear, but that would probably be about it. But yeah, Eddie Thorpe pulls off a real upset, because I didn't see Eddie Thorpe walking out of this one with a victory. I will be honest. I did think from the get go, yeah, no, Trick's got this one in the bag, regardless of sort of Eddie Thorpe's proficiency in a strap match. It's
I had to disagree with you there. I thought they were going to let Eddie Thorpe do it purely for the fact they're trying to build something with this strap match sort of specialty. I think having a run of victories with strap matches like he's had, I thought they were going to leave him to keep it on. It's like a streak, so to speak.
Oh, it makes complete sense why he's been sort of scheduled to win this one. It's just a case that I don't know. I still thought that Eddie Thorpe was going to pull out the win with that one, but I mean, I'm not going to get it right every time, and this time was definitely not one of those times. But we then went into this seems to be the running theme for this match, is that we go out of a match and into a couple of VTs. This first VT was
a recap on Paige and Siobhan Evans' rivalry the last few weeks.
Before that, it was a VT recap of Ricky Stark's appearance on Tuesday night in NXT.
Yes, the Rush debut.
This was the unscheduled debut of Ricky Starks at NXT taping in Orlando, and it's revealed that this Tuesday on NXT, he will be signing his contract live on air.
Well, there's definitely least this bit's been planned, because his debut last week wasn't that. It was horrific. They were still building the ring, and it just kind of looked like they've just kind of gone, "Oh, Ricky, do us a favour, mate. There's a microphone. Go and talk to him for 5 minutes. Give us some time." So the fact they've actually managed to get all this planned, and we know when it's coming in and what's happening with it now, is going to be nice.
Yeah, definitely. It's well, let's see how they pull it off first. Let's see how that all comes together before we make any brash assumptions on how this is all going to sort of go down. So, and yes, we then went into a recap, a VT recap of the history between All Ego Ethan Page and Javon Evans, where, I mean, basically we were seeing how this match is very much Javon putting his career on the line.
Yeah, so he's been medically cleared for this match, but he's still basically being told by medical professionals, don't be stupid, don't do it. But obviously they had to sign a waiver, didn't he, to say that any damage occurred to him during this match was going to be on his own ass, pretty much, that WWE were wiping their hands of any liability to it.
Yeah, they did the usual big company response, is that if you're stupid enough to do it, then you're stupid enough to deal with the consequences.
Pretty much.
And yeah, it's this was a match I was actually really looking forward to, despite the fact that we've seen a fair few matches where Ethan Page wrestles, and we know what to expect from him. Really, Javon Evans was an unknown.
So we've seen obviously all the clips and stuff that they give us with VTs and things like that, but we were actually getting an opportunity to see the OG in the ring for the first time, ourselves.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that took me aback about this match, is how young Javon Evans is compared to how old you normally see professional wrestlers at this level. Once they've reached this level, you're normally looking at late 20s, early 30s, sometimes even into their mid 40s. By the time they've reached legend status, they're normally pushing on 50s, 60s, and everything along those lines. But I mean, I very much got the impression that Javon Evans came out and he was laser focused. I mean, there was nothing that was distracting that guy. It wasn't like going full ADHD brain and going, right, I'm in this match. Oh, there's a squirrel. Literally, I think a unicorn could have passed that guy by and he would have ignored it. That's how focused Javon Evans was walking into this match, and
he meant business as well. This for him was, like I said, it was a ride or die opportunity, and he wanted to make sure that he got every ounce of what's the word? Sort of like concentration locked in before he'd even seen what Ethan Page was doing.
I mean, even during this match, Javon Evans was in control for pretty much 95% of this match.
He was, and he's phenomenal. Like, I had a rough idea what to expect, but actually seeing what this guy can do with a broken jaw too, like, damn. I can't wait until he's fully healed just to be able to see where his limits are. Because I think for him, he's got to be having a decent singles push after this phenomenal feud with Ethan Page.
Well, this is presuming that this feud with Ethan Page ends here. But yeah, I mean, some of the bits and pieces he was pulling off in this match. I mean, I've written so much down on this match in front of me. It's untrue. I mean,
super kicking people on the turnbuckle. He was pulling off cutters onto the apron. Like this guy's just
springboard cutters.
He had nothing to lose.
I mean, he even managed to get a few ounces of karmic payback on Ethan Page. I mean, he wedges Page's sort of left foot between the ring and the steps. Oh wait, no, I've got that. I've read that wrong. So Page ended up doing that to Javon Evans. He trapped his leg between the ring and the steel steps
down because he was getting his ass kicked and he knew it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he basically tried doing exactly the same thing that he'd done to Dante Chen about 3-4 weeks previous.
That's
but
Ethan Page is your standard chicken shit fucking heel. Just doing everything he can to give himself an advantage. And you know what? He needed to in this match because Javon Evans had his number from the start.
Yeah, I mean, the one bit of karmic justice that I did see Javon Evans get was the curb stomp he delivered to Evan Page's jaw.
Yes.
And at one point,
Ethan Page was bleeding pretty profusely as well.
Yeah, he got. I actually put down that based on where he was bleeding and how much he was bleeding, it wouldn't shock me if he's done some damage to the old schnoz.
I mean, it was big enough anyway. Not quite as big as mine, but it was catching up.
Well, who knows? After this, it could overtake the record holder.
We all know that's coming.
Well, I'm sure you could smell it from where you are.
I could definitely smell it was cooking. It was crystal.
But yeah, the ending to this match was so unexpected. I genuinely didn't see this one going the way it went. So Evans goes for a springboard sort of back elbow, but Page sort of intercepts with an absolute surgically precise jab to Javon's jaw.
Right on the button.
I mean, I would hesitate to say that was straight on where Ethan Page was planning on sinking that in. It was, but that was the end of that was the turning point in this match, realistically. And I think the crowd felt very much the same way that I did at the end of that match. It was kind of a case of the fuck, like Javon Evans was in control for like 95% of that match. He should have walked out of that with the fucking W easily. So I suppose the real question is, did Javon Evans take too much time getting his revenge? Should he have just let the loss to Ethan Page be the revenge instead of trying to sort of vent his physical frustration at him? Or
it's a bit of a difficult one with this. I think they both wanted to cause each other severe amounts of pain, and obviously Ethan Page come out with the win. Javon Evans is, well, we're still waiting to see what damage was done to him during that match, but I mean, he's
yet again been left in the middle of the ring drooling blood.
Oh yeah, but and that first break was nasty. So if he's re-broken it or broken it in a second location, it's going to be even worse for him. But Jesus, yeah, no, what a match! Neither of those two are going to leave any hole plugged, and they went for every move they possibly could in their arsenal. And for the fact it took so long for Javon Evans to take one to the face as well, like, he did a very good job protecting himself, even with that double gum guarded.
Yeah. I mean, I think Javon Evans, he probably could have had this wait a little bit longer until he was maybe a little bit stronger to come back, and maybe could have pulled out the win, because, yeah, that jaw was always going to be his Achilles heel, realistically.
Yeah. But like you said, if you leave it too long, it doesn't carry it on, does it?
No, this is it. But we went from that match, which, yeah, what a match. Actually went into a pretty lengthy VT promo where we were being introduced to some of the faces from the upcoming Legends and Future Greats A&E TV show. Some of the contenders in that match, and if you haven't heard of LFG, it's basically WWE's next entry, I suppose, into what they've tried to do in comparison to like UFC's The Ultimate Fighter, is that they take a bunch of relative newbies, if you like, and stick them with some of the most experienced heads in the game, and they're all fighting for a place right here on NXT. I haven't watched any of this yet. I'm going to be watching it because I'm genuinely interested, and yeah, I just want to see how WWE put that one together. But we went from there into an actual promo where we were backstage having Stephanie Baker being interviewed by Sarah Schreiber, and I think the basic gist of this one was basically her saying, yeah, I'm sticking around to see who wins the main event.
That was pretty much all I got from that entire backstage section with Stephanie Baker as well. It was basically just there, yeah, thank you for the congratulations about winning the title. I'm going to be watching the main event to make sure what's going off there. Obviously, with the main event being the fatal four-way between Bayley, Roxanne Perez, Cora Jade, and Julia for the NXT Women's title. So obviously, she's got a little bit of an interest in that one, and to see who could be coming after her title when she starts defending that. Yeah.
And this is when we went into match 5 on the card. And this was the triple threat men's NXT championship match, which would see Grayson Waller face Austin Theory facing current champion Oba Femi.
Oba Femi has never lost a triple threat match. So going into this match against Austin Theory and Grayson Waller was probably going to be a bit more of an interesting triple threat for him anyways. It's basically a 2-on-1 handicap match for the NXT title.
Yeah, and I mean, he called this last week on he called this the sort of the NXT before this, saying that it was going to be a handicap match, and I mean, he wasn't wrong. I was sort of thinking about this before we recorded this this episode of the podcast, specifically around this match, and I've got like an entire page of notes, like top to bottom page of notes from this match of different bits and pieces that we could talk about and things like that. But I think ultimately, if you boil all of this down, it's a case that Grayson Waller and Austin Theory, while they were out there competing as singles, they were fighting as tag team members. And while that works to try and get the better of like the third person in a triple threat, some 9 times out of 10, they were just competing as singles competitors enough to stop each other from taking a win.
Yeah.
And that was ultimately their downfall, in my opinion, is that had they competed to win as a singles competitor, then I think ideally that we'd have seen a title change hands here.
I mean, I think the question you have at the end of it is, if you take the title from Oba Femi, which one of the two half-wits is going to run it better? Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, neither of them have got a huge amount of singles title experience, if any, and it's a big title
Grayson
to have
Waller,
for the first one.
I was going to say, Grayson Waller has no singles titles to his name, and Austin Theory's only just ahead of him, having been men's US champion And I think that reign may have lasted for somewhere between 3 to 6 months, potentially. But yeah, not a like awe-inspiring reign as it goes, and yeah, I mean, despite the fact that Obafemi was essentially wrestling a handicap match here, I think he more than held his own.
I mean, you can definitely tell he's a specialist when it comes to sort of multi-opponent matches. 'Cause
Oh yeah,
he has the power, the strength, and the ability to just manhandle anyone he wants to. And we saw that with the way he threw Austin Theory and Grayson Waller around like they were ragdolls.
yeah. I mean, he was lobbing them around like they were nothing, and some of the don't get me wrong, there were elements of this where I thought, do you know what? If between Waller and Grayson they can decide, or Waller and Theory, sorry, they can decide who it is who's going to win. They've got this in the back. They could quite easily have lifted that um, that title off of Obafemi, and we'd have seen a title as the second title change of the night. But yeah, like, as I said, there's so much that I could sit here and like talk about. I mean,
even if you just break it down into the fact that they've some of the moves that were being used, like there's still so much to talk about in a match that really didn't hold a lot of. The match did exactly what it said on the tin, but there was a fair few highlights. But because the amount of highlights that were there, it made it too much to discuss. Like we could do a whole episode just on that one match, and we'd probably still run out of time.
I was going to say, if I was going to do that, I'd do it watch-along style. We'd be watching the match as we talk about it, because that's the only way to keep all the details in one place.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I could jump from the top of the page to the bottom of the page, and it all makes sense in my head, but for anybody listening to this rambling coming out of my mouth is that it's so disjointed and incohesive just because, like, I really enjoyed this match. This was the match of the card for me. Despite what the main event is, this match took it home.
Yeah.
This match should have been the main event.
Again, I would completely agree with that statement too.
And that's no disrespect to the women in the next match. No disrespect to Bayley, Perez, Cora Jade, or Julia. It's a case that this match it gelled together so well, considering I don't have a very high opinion of either Grayson Waller or Austin Theory. I think they wrestled a really good match. They told a really good story, proved why they've got that WWE contract and why they have held that contract for such a long time.
Yeah, and they're polarizing. They're very much like Marmite, but the way they work together does make you kind of understand why they work so well.
Yeah, definitely. But ultimately, as we've alluded to, Obafemi ends up retaining the championship for this match, all because Theory and Waller can't decide between the two of them what direction they want to go in.
That is pretty much the entire reason why Obafemi manages to get away with what he does, because Grayson Waller and Austin Theory can't decide, and then just to put the icing on the cake, Grayson Waller hit Austin Theory with a stunner, which then I mean, I loved watching that. That was the icing on the cake for what was a very good match. Just to see the start of, and we've mentioned about it before, about are we about to see the start of A-Town Down Under crumbling, and that stunner is very much like it drives a wedge in. We've already seen some cracks appearing, but that stunner is going to drive a wedge.
Yeah, it was just that cherry on top of such a really well put together match. And yeah, I mean, in my mind, there was no doubt that Obafemi was going to walk out of this remaining champion. There were a few moments in the match where I did quite sort of waver a little bit, and I thought, oh, have Waller and Theory got this together? And then they sort of proved that they didn't. Now, after the match, we see all the lighting in the arena change, and we see the Masked Foursome return up in the crowd, up in the gangways. Very Shield-esque. Very much making their presence known and making a very quick entrance to go and just completely lay waste to Obafemi, which, when it's a 4-on-1 situation, it's not that impressive, in my opinion. It's not
too much to do, did it? Considering the guy just had a hell of a match beforehand as well.
I was going to say, the guy's just finished taking on 2 other guys. He's then got to try and face off 4 fresh guys. And
Obafemi's not Bonnie Blue.
No, this is it. It's a case that, as impressive as Obafemi is, if he'd managed to remain standing during that assault afterwards, I don't think I think we'd have all been sort of wondering if he's human, quite frankly.
Well, I'd have been comparing him to the likes of Braun Strowman at that sort of point, because that's another huge superstar that takes a lot of men to get to his knees.
Yeah. But we then go from that match, that scene in ring, straight into Ava's office, the GM office promo. Ava being interviewed by Sarah Schreiber, and sort of Ava's about as shocked about this foursome as we are, or at least that is the way it comes across. We know that the last sort of PLE, NXT PLE before Stand and Deliver during WrestleMania weekend is Roadblock, which is taking place at Madison Square Garden, which is just, it's a historic venue. I mean, you hear a lot of, especially the older wrestlers, all of them talking about playing the Garden. The Garden is like one of the holy grail sites of professional wrestling. If you can play in the Garden, you can play anywhere.
Right.
So Roadblock will definitely be an interesting one to go forward with. During this promo as well, we also see Ariana Grace, supposedly the NXT liaison to TNA. I imagine, again, as we said earlier on, we do not sort of follow TNA from either a fan perspective at the moment or anything else realistically. We're certainly not covering it on the podcast, even though NXT and TNA have got a multi-year deal. We'll cover the NXT sort of half of it. I'm happy to promote the TNA matches, but at the minute, really don't have the time to sit and watch them. Who knows, if the podcast takes off and starts paying me and we can start getting a decent wage out of it, then I'll quit my full-time job and I'll sit and watch freaking wrestling all day. I don't mind, but
I'm not sure we could do that for too long. That's a lot of wrestling, my dude.
Oh yeah, we'd start seeing wrestling matches in the street. We'd start taking down little old ladies and things like that.
By the time you think we're already doing sort of like 3 weeklies plus PLEs every so often, you add TNA in there, Ring of Honor, AEW, New Japan. Plus
it'd be a dribbling mess, mate.
Yeah. It'd
be an absolute dribbling mess.
Insane.
Yeah. I'd never see the light of day again.
No, we'd need a full editing team just to start watching stuff and doing it for us.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, she comes in to basically introduce an old familiar face we all know and love, Santino Marella.
Oh, yeah.
welcoming him back to WWE as he is now the Director of Authority over at TNA. And
With his
basically
little
this
cop badge.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was always a bit of a fan of Santino Marella, but more for the comedy factor than the wrestling factor.
Yeah.
He was very much a comedic. He was comedy relief when he was in WWE, and I'm glad he's found a more serious role in TNA, and that they're utilizing him slightly differently. From what I understand, he's doing an incredibly good job over there. It's just, he will always be the guy that mispronounces people's names.
And the fastest ever elimination in the Royal Rumble.
Yeah, holding the record for the shortest time in a Royal Rumble match of 1 second.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, and apparently Santino and Ava go off to discuss some of their ideas, as they both had ideas of what to do with this little talent exchange that they've talent exchange situation they seem to have found themselves in, which will be interesting to see how that plays out. I'd love to know what would be discussed in with that those ideas. What are they looking for? Maybe we'll see something on Tuesday.
Possibly. And there's a lot of options for a lot more titles to be defended on NXT TV now, because we've got the opportunity for TNA to bring their titles over to NXT and kind of expand their repertoire over here. And it shows that we could also start filling some of the divisions up for extra bonus matches, the dream matches, so to speak.
This is it. But ultimately, we now come to our main event match, which was the now fatal four-way for the NXT Women's Championship, which, as we mentioned earlier on, sees Julia, the defending champion, defend against Bayley, Roxanne Perez, and a late entry, Cora Jade. And yeah, I mean, a really good match. Again, I said this earlier on. Do not think this is me taking away from what these women managed to achieve during this match. This match wasn't quite to the same level as the men's triple threat, in my view.
No, it wasn't. I mean, there were some interesting spots. I mean, there was just some funny bits in there as well, to be fair. For the little while, Julia was just sat on the turnbuckle watching the other three fight. She might as well just had a cup of tea and a sandwich while she was there. It was interesting.
Again, I can't say I'd have done any differently. I'd have played that exactly the same way. I'd have gone, yeah, do you know what? You guys fucking crack on. I'll be over here. Right. Pull out a hip flask and I'll be pull out a thermos. I'll be well away.
Yeah, as long as you don't pull out something that Macho Man Randy Savage would have done.
But we saw at the beginning of the match a series of really quick pinfalls, and yeah, we saw some sort of temporary alliances as you tend to see in these sort of multi-superstar matches, where it's all for one and one
But the
one
alliances
for
were ones that you pretty much expected. You knew that it was going to be Bayley and Julia that were going to be running an alliance, and you knew Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade would be running one too, because they've done it in previous matches.
Well, we saw at one point a sort of a very short alliance between Roxanne and Bayley, which we wouldn't have expected to see, as there seems to have been quite a lot of animosity building between those two. But it just shows that to try and keep this, try and get everything moving in the direction that they want it to move in, that no alliance is an alliance too far, sort of thing.
No, it's like a Royal Rumble alliance, and it only lasts until it lasts until it doesn't, I suppose.
Yeah, this is it. And we've said this before about, especially more so in NXT than in the main roster, but when we see these sort of multi-superstar matches, where they are all in the ring at the same time. You tend to find more so that one or more superstars is there just to fill a spot.
Yes, and
And
we've named that superstar quite often as the same one that we see week in, week out.
yeah, they don't really seem to know what to do with Cora Jade as such. I mean,
No.
Cora Jade seemed to worm her way. She seemed to strong arm her way into this match late on. So they'd already started with a lot of the promotional shit, and Cora Jade came in as a late entry. But even though her and Roxanne Perez did have some moments of working together, it's very much the same as in the men's NXT Championship. Is that them two working together was ultimately their own undoing, because had they actually pulled the trigger and gone at each other at some point, we might have had a different. We might well have had a different outcome to this match.
I mean,
Um,
I don't think we really could have had a different outcome to this match, to be fair.
really?
Well, if you look at...
Roxanne Perez is a former two-time NXT Women's Champion. Bailey, highly decorated main roster wrestler. I mean, less said about Cora Jade, the better. But certainly those
That's my
two were
point.
a
But
high contention.
Bailey's done a lot better than the NXT Women's title. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the level of the NXT Women's title. But Bailey has won higher and more prestigious titles, so giving her back the NXT title just seems like a bit of a slap in the face of Julia. Roxanne Perez doesn't need a title at the moment. We've both said that she's on a hunt for a push onto the main roster. She's also got an Elimination Chamber match coming up, a qualifier match coming up. So you're not going to give her a title and then put her into another PLE to go for another title. Cora Jade just doesn't seem to have the manpower to be able to do too much on her own. She relies a lot on Roxanne Perez to help her. So taking the strap away from Julia at this point just didn't seem like it was going to be an option.
No, and in fairness, Julia did do a lot in this to sort of defend that title. She very much picked her moments as to when she was going to intervene. One of the things that I picked out, one of the cherry pick moments for Julia, where she did something like a modified octopus hold on Bailey. Mm-hmm. It took her 2 attempts to lock this in, but she managed to get it in. She eventually managed to get it in, and I think it was those moments where there were little slip-ups. And I get it's a live performance; anything can happen in a live performance. But whereas the men's match was very clean, there were no mistakes that I spotted. Sort of no missteps, no mismoves, nothing like that. It was all very prim, polished, proper sort of match performances. The women's wasn't that way, and I don't know if it was the late addition of Cora Jade that may have just upsetted the flow, because I can imagine Bailey, Perez, Julia, they'd all sort of sat down and figured out, yeah, this is how it's roughly going to go, and everything along those lines. And then they had to try and sort of work Cora Jade into that match order to try and make sure that she was at least somewhat relevant to the match ending. But there were lots of little
section. To be fair, we've had her thrown in a lot where she doesn't need to be. We've both said in the past as well, we think it's because she's scheduled or contracted to make a certain amount of appearances, and they're just trying to fill them all in at the same time.
Yeah, we're just not seeing. I'm not seeing the value she adds into the match, even though traditionally the way she got into the match was obviously during the the Triple Threat Contenders Summit that was held a week or two previously. She came in and pretty much laid waste to both Julia and Bailey with, I think it was a kendo. I want to say a kendo stick or a guitar. I'm not sure which one. Either way, she came in with a weapon, laid waste to both of them, and that was essentially how she managed to worm her way into the match. That's quite a strong entrance for somebody that, other than that, other than a few, yeah, I just don't think her character has been built quite to the extent that they could have just dropped her in there without any issue at all. I think had it been same contenders, had it been a triple threat match between Perez, Jade, and Julia for the NXT Women's title, and they dropped Bailey in there at the last minute, Bailey is a strong enough character to be able to carry that forward and still have it make sense to a certain degree. Bailey coming in as the veteran and saying, "Yeah, do you know what? Actually, I want a piece of this. I'm in this match now. Again, like it or fucking lump it, basically." And that would have made sense. But Cora Jade, no.
Yeah, she's
no,
not
definitely
strong enough
not.
character, and she's definitely not polarizing enough either.
Don't get me wrong, her abilities in the ring I can't knock. And at one point, Cora Jade manages to pull off quite impressively a 3-high super power bomb off the off one of the corner turnbuckles, which is just a step above what we've seen even some of the men do. So for her to have pulled off something like that without causing any major injury to any of the other three women is a minor miracle in itself. But I mean, Julia ends up retaining by pinning Perez after hitting a Northern Light bomb, and Stephanie Baker actually comes out to the ring to celebrate with Julia.
Which was
two
quite interesting to see.
It's two strong women female champions, sort of standing shoulder to shoulder. It was a powerful scene, to be sure, but closing seconds, we have an NXT debut of Jordynne Grace making her grand entrance onto NXT, having been released by TNA recently, I believe, which is an odd move, but I don't think she necessarily had to have been released from TNA to then make her way over to NXT, bearing in mind that the two are now linked for 5 years. It just seems a bit of an exercise in futility almost, but as it goes, Jordynne Grace is now NXT. And I look forward to seeing more about her, as I don't know an awful lot about Jordynne Grace.
No, it's not a wrestler I've seen a lot of times. So it'll be interesting to see how she fits into the division, what sort of titles she's going to be looking at, and how she's going to go about getting them.
Yeah, this is it. But that sort of brings us to the end of Vengeance Day, and yeah, I'll repeat what I said to begin with. What an absolute stonker of a PLE we had. I mean, this is why I said right at the beginning, I don't think WWE can afford to look at NXT as a developmental proving ground anymore. They're bringing out too much. They're bringing out too much for it to be classed as developmental anymore. It makes no sense whatsoever to have to have especially the women in this division being inadvertently relegated to a developmental provision past this point. Otherwise, we're just devaluing all the good work that they do, and again, taking nothing away from the men in the division, the men in NXT either. It's just, yeah, we are looking at SmackDown and Raw's little brother. Don't get me wrong, they're still the little brother, but that little brother comes back hard.
Oh yeah, definitely. And with that,
I,
with Vengeance Day level PLEs coming forward, especially with the build up to WrestleMania week and how much money they like to spend on performance and production that week, I think we're going to see some incredible stuff coming up from NXT.
Well, this sort of Judgment Day makes me look forward to Roadblock, which we'll see. I think it's like 4 weeks. It's the last PLE before Stand and Deliver. It's the last PLE. It's the last NXT PLE before WrestleMania. And yeah, I mean, it's certainly shaping up to be one hell of a one hell of a road to WrestleMania as it is. But ordinarily, I'd ask you, Rich, at this point, what your match of the card was. But I think you're probably in agreement with me at this point, with it being the men's NXT.
Austin Theory, which is really surprising considering I'm not big fans of Grayson Waller or Austin Theory, but they put on a good show today, and yeah, it was a fucking good match. Definitely my match of the night.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with you on that. As we said earlier on, I think we could have quite easily swapped the women's NXT Championship match for the men's, and it would have fitted so much better with the performances we got. But regardless of that, we've come to the close of this episode of Finishers and Factions, and this was Finishers and Factions does Vengeance Day. We will be back to cover Monday Night Raw. And that Monday Night Raw, I believe, if I remember correctly, is coming from Charlotte, North Carolina. So hit that subscribe button. Keep those notifications on
for future episodes.